beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine till world success be nobleness and every gain divine. When I was in school, you know, we used to sing it something like this. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties, above the fruited plain. Look here, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on me.
Good evening and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We are broadcasting from Jackson, Mississippi in an African-American owned broadcasting studio. We're being seen on Facebook, on YouTube, on Roku TV, and on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. Now, this evening, we're going to have a lively discussion. I have two prominent guests in the studio with me, and we're going to be discussing some current issues, but we're going to start out focusing a little bit on America. And you heard and you saw Ray Charles do that wonderful rendition of God Bless America. God bless America, the greatest nation that ever existed. And we're going to talk about how America got here and why it celebrates its independence. And we're going to discuss how it impacts all Americans. And so we want you to call us in tonight at 800-492-5186 and join this lively discussion. Brett, it's good to see you and good to have you back in the studio. How have you been?
I've been doing fine, Socrates. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, wonderful. Last time I talked to you, you were in Puerto Rico.
Yes, sir. Mr. Schwartz has a second home down there. He says he's trying to retire, but he's never going to retire. But I went down there, and a wonderful trip. You were right. You've been a couple of times.
I have.
Yes, it was different enough to have a different culture, but not intimidating enough with the difference where you didn't know what currency you're using, or they had a Burger King, they had still in America, but they speak Spanish. But it's a beautiful island. Spend a lot of time on the beach.
What would be the minority in Puerto Rico?
Probably me.
Oh, okay.
Americanos. Obviously they're Puerto Rican, but you see them. People, you get this a lot. Is that where are you from? And you're like, I'm from Mississippi. Oh, I'm from Atlanta. Oh, how long? I've been living down here 12 years. I don't know. Do you know about the tax haven?
Well, I heard about it. I never had a tax issue.
couple of years ago, they made it where, because the Puerto Rican government got in some trouble with municipal derivatives and got in a large amount of debt. Now, if you move down there and establish residency down there, you can not pay federal taxes, 37%.
Oh, and you may be able to catch a paper towel or something that the president might throw out.
It's an island. I mean, it's an island.
Is it a part of America or not?
It's a territory. They were having a vote and a debate whether. What's weird, what I learned, is they've been conquered by almost everybody because it's an island, and they're really independent of they want to be Puerto Rico. They're independent kind of little country, but then they also want the United States aid. So that it's about 51% that doesn't want to be a state.
Right. Do they vote?
Yeah. Actually, they were debating about that when we were there, and they were debating about whether they should vote or not. And right now, it's more like a republic vote where they vote for people who vote. The legislatures vote, is my understanding now.
So it's like, you play to see if you'll get invited to the NAACP tournament. That's
the moment they want to become a state, they're a state. But I mean, they were having this debate while I was there, and at 51%, they were like, we don't want to be a state. But I mean, I was told now. They want American aid, but they don't want to be a state. They won't be a territory, yes. But here's a problem. Territories can't file bankruptcy. They were, the country, now this was a couple of years ago in 2009, they were $6 billion in debt, and they couldn't file bankruptcy because states can file bankruptcy, territories cannot.
If you can't file bankruptcy, what happens to you?
You become a tax haven, and they try to move some other money down there to help you out. Now, Old San Juan is beautiful. The beaches are beautiful. You remember Lou Diamond Phillips?
No.
The guy who starred in Young Guns and La Bamba, the actor.
I don't do much.
Okay, well, anyways, he was a famous actor, and he was down there, and we were sitting by him.
Y'all hung out?
We did not hang out. I was like, damn, Lou Diamond Phillips. And people were like, And I was like, no, that's Lou Diamond Phillips. I seen that.
Okay. I wonder if anyone said when I was down there, damn, that's Socrates Garrett.
Probably when they were looking for the bill, for someone to pay the bill, but besides that.
Always. Dr. Henderson, it's good to have you in the studio. How have you been?
Well, I'm doing fine, sir. I'm very proud to be here, and I've been doing about 99% in a very positive manner, doing well, feeling well, and just looking for the next 8 years to continue to work on this program that I've been working on since 2000.
When's the last time you've been out of the country?
Well, I went out 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I decided to visit South Africa.
Tell us about it.
Well, I did it in my office on the internet.
Okay.
I have enough sense not to spend $10,000 or $15,000 going to another racist country where I know I'm not going to learn anything and see nothing new. I'm still going to see Burger King and Arby's, Hilton Hotel. So why would I go physically and waste my money on a vacation where I'm going to see the same thing I could see in Jackson, New Orleans, Atlanta, or California?
Well, that may be a bit small-minded. Didn't you tell me you had a staff person that just went to the Holy Land, etc.?
Of course. That's what I say, a staff person.
Yeah, and did she tell you that she enjoyed the trip?
Of course. Did
she tell you that she saw where Jesus walked?
Of course. That's propaganda, but she told me that.
And she was proud of that?
Of course.
It was uplifting to her?
Exactly.
She paid a lot of money to go do that?
Of course.
And you don't recommend that?
I do not recommend it. That's a good way to get you brainwashed, keep you in political, economic, and social slavery until you die.
Political, economic, and social slavery.
To believe in that kind of thing and then spend thousands of dollars to see some propaganda that people revised and put in books and made themselves look good as kings and queens, and then the people that go on the vacations are taught that propaganda, and they believe it, and they will give their whole souls away to believe those ideas, thinking they're going to go to heaven when they die, live in hell on earth, and then die and go to hell.
Wow. Well, my guests always have their own opinions, and they are strong-willed free men, and they speak their mind. So it is wonderful to be able to get out of this country. It is wonderful to be able to see various places and other cultures and see how things operate, get new ideas and new concepts from interacting with those that do and look different from you. One of the things that I always say about Mississippi, and this we're broadcasting from Mississippi, and one of the things I always say is that our strength lies in our diversity. If I could just get everybody to buy into that, then Mississippi would move from the bottom to in the top 10 if we just would take advantage of our strength, which is our diversity. Now, when the show first began, we brought on Ray Charles with God Bless America. And this weekend is a holiday weekend, and we're going to celebrate Independence Day all over this country. And black folk all over this country and white folk are going to come together on this day to celebrate the independence of America. But it means a little something different to different people. And tonight we're going to discuss what it means to my guests. So Brent, tell us your understanding of what the 4th of July represents.
Well, to me, there's two parts there. The first part is how I grew up celebrating it, and that was out usually either on a boat or by a pool and mom or dad cooking burgers. So there's that family component there that I always think of the 4th of July. Now, looking back on it, historically, I do believe it was the beginning of what you said was the greatest country and the greatest experiment ever. We have to remember, when I was talking to some Chinese and Japanese individuals a couple of years ago, and they looked at me and said, Brent, the problem we have with your country is that when you get to the first millennium, then y'all can talk. We're not an old country compared to the other countries that have been here for centuries and centuries and thousands of years. It was the start of an idea of independence that we're still having to fight to every day and having to earn it every day. Whether we're talking about Roe versus Wade or we're talking about 1960s or Juneteenth or anything like that, but it was a start of an idea where we could all be free and be independent.
So take me back to the beginning.
I was not there.
I know you weren't there, but you're an educated man, and so you've been taught in the greatest schools in this country. Take me back for a minute and to the Nina and the Pina and the Santa Maria, the ships that were flowing from Spain, and their mission and how we got to America. What were we looking for?
Well, the same thing everybody was looking for: fame, gold, and fortune. I mean, that's just man. But of course, that was 1492, what you're describing, and Columbus.
That was America, right?
Well, I mean, the whole issue, as you know, is that we thought everybody was looking for India. So I mean, no one knew where they were heading, and I mean, if you're really talking about discovering America, you got to go back to the Vikings, And of course, then you get to an argument, can you discover a country where people were already here? Just because you're new to it doesn't mean it's a new country. But I didn't discover Puerto Rico when my ass went down there last week. But no, I mean, but yes, but what your point is, it was back then to the Europeans, the Spanish, it showed the next frontier. Like space is to ours now, it was, can you get past the Atlantic? And a lot of people cannot. We forget sometimes it was a 6-month trip.
So it was a great experiment that countries like Spain and Europe set out to discover a new land. As you say, they were looking for India, and they got.
Well, they were looking for a shorter trade route.
And they ended up in a country called America.
Yes.
And when they got here, it was inhabited by American Indians, Native Americans.
Correct. And they called them Indians because they thought they truly were in India. You're looking at me like you've never heard of any of this.
No, I'm not. I didn't do well in American history.
I mean, do you do?
They didn't teach black history, so I didn't do well in America.
Well, I'm just saying, Dr. Anderson, did I get that mostly correct?
Well, you're exactly right.
Yes, sir.
So the Native Americans wasn't naturally called Indians?
No, they called them Indians, but that was a mistake by the Europeans. They thought they were in India.
And that's where they got that name?
Yes.
What were they called before that?
I don't think that. I mean, whatever they called each other. I mean, you don't. You don't call yourself a name of a tribe if you're the only people you know. So until you're discovered, you don't know there's other people out there. So I don't. I mean, obviously, like I said, the Vikings came. I think Eric the Red was the first one. I didn't know this was going to be a history test, but around 500, 400.
To the greatest country in the world,
yes.
and where it came from, how we got here, and then we're going to celebrate today. So we ought to go back to the beginning and watch this as it develops.
The important thing, if you're talking about the development, what we forget, especially when people who are born here and just assume it's a right to be born here, there was no weak person that came across that ocean for 6 months. You just didn't. You had to be tough mentally. You had to be tough physically. Whether you wanted to come over here, whether you were brought over here against your will, there was a debt you were going to pay on that ocean. And the problem is, I think, with every country, every great tour de force, where you're talking about the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, you get soft and fat and die. And I think that's the problem that we're having right now, is we're becoming too entitled and forgetting that we have to, one, pay for the sacrifices people put for us. And then I think, tough times make tough men, good times make soft men.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes, sir.
you are an educated man, and you've gone to some of our finest universities. What is your understanding of how America came about?
Well, Brent is right when he talked about the fact they didn't know anything about this country. They were looking for a shorter trade route to India because the Europeans were dominating Europe, of course, and they was putting their tentacles out all over the so-called known world, and were trying to discover new markets so they could take advantage of the goods and services in those areas. And they accidentally got cast aside, ended up in what they called at the time the Americas. It wasn't America at the time, and eventually it became America, but they just got lost. And they found some people. Most of those Europeans that got lost over here, most of them did not get back. They had to stay here for a while. They were taken care of by the so-called Native Americans, and a few went back to Europe, and they started looking at some of the opportunities that were in this foreign land. And to make this thing short, they finally discovered there was some very good, strong monetary value in this area, gold and silver, iron and ore. And they decided they would spend big money to hire people to come over here to this area and explore it because they wanted to get rich. The Europeans came to America and all the other places. One reason, and one reason only, and that was for economic gain. They were starving to death in most of the cities in Europe. They had people in poorhouses, in houses of prostitution. They had people that were out of work, and they had to have some relief. And that's why they started moving people out of those places that I mentioned to these new foreign ports that eventually became America and later the United States of America.
So we recall in history that was something called Plymouth Rock. And supposedly that was a great landing spot for Europeans coming over to this country. And we began to develop heroes at the very beginning with John Smith and Pocahontas, and all kinds of heroes started to emerge in that environment. But the poor Indians didn't fare well in that agreement.
Of course not. They didn't fare well then, and they do not fare well today. If you look at some of the recent Supreme Court decisions about so-called American natives, they were just screwed again a few weeks ago, and they, dealing with their sovereignty, with their land rights and so forth. They had no power in the beginning prior to this latest Supreme Court decision. They were just had what we call a figurehead land, and they had figurehead rulers. But we all know that the Bureau of Indian Affairs made all the decisions, and they propped up those Indian reservations with a lot of fake Indians, and most of them are 90% European in most cases, because they have what they call those $5 Indians, and those guys rose to the top of most of the Indian tribes, and those colored so-called tribes that were Native Americans that were not dominated through inter-European relations were cast aside. And eventually, they decided that we're going to give these people some independence. We're going to give them some land. And since they didn't want them in the so-called colonized states or territory, and as they would expand, they would get more and more Europeans to come over here to use these vast areas, get the vast economic resources, and they wanted to push the Native Americans aside, and did. They did it constitutionally, through war, poisoned a lot of them, and just outright hunted some down and killed them.
Wow. Wow. We're having a great discussion. We're leading up in our discussion where we're going to talk about America, and we're going to get to this great celebration that's going on this weekend. But sometimes we have to just go back and we have to reflect. And so we're doing a little bit of that. Now, Brent, I believe that there were 13 colonies established.
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
And so Independence Day, what does Independence Day mean? What were we independent from?
We were declaring our independence from the British Empire. That, no taxation without representation, the Boston Tea Party, and that basically they don't know how to govern us from over across the sea, and that we should be independent.
Was it the desire to have religious freedom that was the driving force, or pure economics, as Dr. Henderson said?
I will defer or agree with Dr. Henderson. I think today, whether we're talking about space exploration or whatever we're talking about, economics will be your main. If you notice that, if you really look at the wars we fight throughout history, there's never been one without an economic component. So I think that's always be a driving force in empires, countries, or people. But like you said, people are trying to escape kings and tyranny. And, whether you're talking about the Quakers or whoever coming over here, the Pilgrims, looking for religious freedom. Look, it for whatever reason, we Americans have always had a sense of adventure. And, at the time, getting on a boat and coming over in 1700s or 1600s was the equivalent of getting on a space shuttle. It had that cowboy mentality. Some people just didn't come back. Some people didn't survive. So some people left. It's like I tell people all the time, we all didn't come from kings or queens. Most of the people who came over here, a large portion of them probably had a reason to leave.
Yeah, I understand that they came out of the jails and out of dysfunctional families. We're broadcasting live right here in Jackson, Mississippi on We Believe Broadcast Studio. We're being seen in over 139 countries. You can find us on Facebook, on YouTube, on WeBelieveDigital.com. Also on Roku TV. We're going to break for this commercial, and we'll be right back after this few break. We're broadcasting live right here from Jackson, Mississippi at the We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. My guest is Dr. Eldridge Henderson, a renowned author and guest speaker all across this country. His program airs on Thursday night on WMPR, or 100,000 watts radio station, where he talks about various topics that you ought to listen to and join in and catch him there. Also, we have with us an attorney that's got some degree of fame that has gone up against the biggest and attorneys across this country, with cases like Microsoft that he was involved in, etc., $1 billion cases, etc., right here out of Jackson, Mississippi. And with that kind of experience and that kind of exposure, he's seen a lot of things in the world. And so we're honored to have him in the studio with us this evening. Now, Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
4th of July, we're gonna celebrate this weekend. And tell me what the 4th of July means to African Americans.
Well, for some African Americans, they believe that 4th of July is something to be celebrated in a very positive manner, because they falsely believe that they are part and have been part of America. So therefore, since they were taught that, it was never codified in law that they were, but they just want to do like their masters have taught them in the past, to celebrate the 4th of July. That's what most black people believe. I believed that until the 1960s. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world, to celebrate the 4th of July, because those were a few days that I didn't have to work as a slave, in Mississippi during that time. I mean, on the peonage system as a sharecropper in those early days. I thought it was great. But later on, I found that your guess is correct. They had something called the Revolutionary War because of taxation and no representation. But that only included the European white males. They were fighting for that right to not pay taxes to England. They wanted to rule everything because they had already codified that in some of the early colonial documents, that this country was set up for white males only, excluding their wives, their mothers, any other minority, including the people that were here originally, the so-called Native Americans. And that was the beginning of the codification of the laws, the ordinances of the United States.
So did the blacks fight in the Revolutionary War?
They fought strongly, and they were misled. Many of the blacks, if you look at some of the old documents, were told, if you fight in this war, you can be freed. You will get some land. You will not have to be a slave anymore. And a lot of people don't know that there were a lot of free black folks in America. All black Americans have never been in slavery. So in Boston and other countries, Philadelphia, other cities during that time, had a good segment of black free people in that area. But they were semi-slaves. Many of them couldn't own property. They couldn't get certification to be carpenters and sailors and stuff. When they worked for other people. They had no rights at that time until a few years later, where they couldn't even testify against white folks in America. The black women had unlimited opportunities to be professional slaves, where they had no respect by the European males nor the black males. Read the history in the early days and you will find that. They were considered a non-entity. Even though the black males were considered non-humans, they treated the black females worse than the white males treated the black males free and enslaved.
So, Brent, the good doctor makes a case that African Americans really don't have a lot to celebrate. But clearly, it's a great day in America that we recognize on our independence. So there is a great deal of celebration going forward. I know you don't speak for white people. I know you don't. But I want to understand, Barack Obama's book said that I have to see things through your eyes for me to understand and for me to grow. How do you see Independence Day in America, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I don't think Dr. Henderson makes a case. I think Dr. Henderson is reciting facts. I mean, that was the facts of the matter back in the 1700s. But like I said previously, I look at it as just a stepping stone, whether it's a celebration of King, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer. Every 4th of July reminds us that these, whether we're talking about the Declaration of Independence, where we're talking about the Bill of Rights, that freedom has to be paid for. That freedom, one, we have to remember who had sacrificed, because what we're doing now, whether it's trying to the Sunnis and Shiites, when we went into Iraq and we put Sunnis in power, I might be incorrect about that. When we put one of them in power, they're like, great, we get to kill everybody. No, and we were like, no, it's a democracy. They get to vote even though they're minorities. And they're like, no, they've been killing us. And every time we rotate power, we kill the other one. We've never had what we've got going on to this country. Are they tremendous sins? Yes, and he describes some of them. But like I said, every day and as long as we remember the sacrifices, as long as you remember that we have to improve every day, as long as we remember we're not equal, it gets these conversations going. And to me, that's what truly the 4th of July is that we're trying to have the greatest experiment. But I mean, reality is every great super country dies. And then that's something we need to start bringing about. Do you think, Socrates, we've already passed the tipping end? Have we on the way down and just don't know it at this point?
Well, I'd like to ask a question before I answer.
Okay.
What caused the great countries to fall?
Well, I mean, what it finds out is, and I read a book in high school called Arnold J. Toynbee. He was a famous historian, and it's not so much a country, but every great, they call them tour de forces, and every great empire had a moment where the people had to overcome a tremendous, usually natural disaster or invading army. And then they took that power they had from conquering that huge issue, and then they had a good run. And then they forgot the sacrifices, and they forgot what it took to accomplish that great thing. And then they got fat. They learned how to feed themselves. They gave themselves cake, whether it's the Roman Empire, whether the Egyptians, and incompetence takes over. And, 1776, 1600, coming over that sea. To me, that you didn't have any weaker. You couldn't be dumb back then. You just couldn't, because times were too tough. Too many people were dying, things like that. And then whether we're conquering the West, fighting the Native Americans, fighting the Spanish, fighting the English, we had wars to eliminate the weak and the dumb. We do not have those anymore. Now, I don't want anybody dying. I don't want anything like that. But like I said, with every great system, tough times make tough men. Easy times make poor men. And it's just one of those situations. It repeats.
Wow. Doc,
Yes.
the beginning of civilization was at the Nile River, on the banks of the Nile, is according to the limited education that I have.
Right, I can agree with that.
Why did that civilization fall?
Well, it's because of greed, custom, religion, and other matters, specifically greed. As you know, when a country or a nation or a group of people find that they are having difficulties surviving, it is like a bird that's on the ground, pecking seeds or weeds or worms. He's going to walk and eat every little thing he can in that area. Then he's going to run across another 2 or 3 inches. Thousands of them do that. And they will land and move 2 or 3 miles, eat everything they can, and all of them fly away because the leader says it's time to go, and they'll find another area. And that's what happened in that Nile area. People start moving into what we call today Africa, just as they did in America. They will come in on horses or ships or boats and land on the coast. They will get to know the people in those areas, befriend them, find out everything they could about them, and then they will solidify their forces. And they always had two entities that was going to protect them. I'm talking about the people that come into these countries. They always had the religious element and some type of military with them. And they would send the religious people out into the community for the Africans, for the Native Americans or whatever. But in Africa, they had those Muslims, not the so-called Christian types that you are familiar with, to go and brainwash the people. And eventually, and I told you this before, the conquerors would then build a restricted area for themselves and their people. And they would eventually fence it in and call it a fort or secure area. And they would tell the natives in Africa, in America, in Latin America, you cannot come in this area unless you're invited. And then, as they had their men, the priests, the preachers, or whatever you want to call them, in the military, out there exploring, looking for opportunity, economic opportunity, brainwashing the people, saying, your religion is no good, your language is no good, I don't like the way you look, I don't like the way you dress. You need to change. And as they would move economically and they find gold, silver, or iron, or ore, they would say, this is something. So they would go and move those people out of that area after they find all the geographic areas where they had those economic opportunities. Then they would eliminate those people. But at the same time, they are using an old tactic that we use today. They always had favorites among the Africans, among the Native Americans, among the Latin Americans. The white Europeans always believed in intersexual relations with those people because originally they didn't bring a lot of white women with them. And they started a new class. We here in America know that the group they created was called the mulattoes. And many other areas, Africa, Asia, Latin America, they had the same groups. So those people were their sons and daughters. They were the favorites. And I don't have time to go into all the history, but you will see how they set a buffer class up and told them that you're a little better than the original Native Americans. You're a little better than the original black people that came from Africa on the boat. On and on. They told the Hispanics that. The people from Cuba, the same. And there was that new class of people.
Well, Doc, we're going to talk about the new class. We're talking about America. And the question was asked to me, have we reached the tipping point in America? That the tipping point being where great countries start to decline. It's a tough question. It's a question that we really have to ponder, we really have to talk about. Because no one wants America to fall. No one in America wants America to fall. Now, certainly there are countries out there that are every day that are plotting and trying and attempting to destroy America. But this great experiment is the best that we know. Now, I am African American and a descendant of slavery. And there is no other country that I would rather be in than America. The freedoms that we have. Even though all of these freedoms did not apply to African Americans originally as was written into the constitutions, and many of them came through amendments to the Constitution, and we're still fighting for those rights today. But there is no place that we know of that allows individuals to move freely, to live where you want to live, to socialize, to vote, to have freedom of speech, to protest. It's a great experiment, and it's been a blessing on this continent. Now, whether it has reached the tipping point or not is a question for you to decide. There's tremendous unrest in America. And so I'm going to turn to you, Brent, and talk about the great divide that's in America when 65% of your population is opposed to the Supreme Court's ruling, where 9 members now are opposed to 65% of America's population in one ruling on abortion. Can that kind of divide sustain itself in this great country?
Well, I think when you say 65%, it's probably more a population exists in the Democratic states. But if you look at the states themselves, I was looking at it when I came here, I think it's 26 that will prohibit abortion and 24 that will not. So on their states, it's closer than you would think it would be. But can we survive it? Legally speaking, what they're saying is that all the social issues, or if it's not named in the Constitution, it needs to go back to your state governments. Like with Mississippi, abortion's not technically, I disagree with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, let me say that. And I think we really need to look at what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did to the court by thinking about herself first and not giving Barack Obama an opportunity to appoint a judge at that time when Barack Obama asked her to step down. I think we need to remember it's the sacrifice of the individual for the betterment of the group. But with that said, whether it's gay marriage, interracial marriage, contraceptive being purchased, or abortion, what they're really saying is it's not in the federal Constitution, and that these 9 people shouldn't have you need to go back to your state government. Now, I'm more comfortable with people who sound like me, who drink the food I drink, eat the food I eat and drink what I drink, ruling on some of these social issues, than I am to 9 people, especially as political as it's getting at the Supreme Court. So while it might be a bump in the road, and of course I think it's going to reverse itself, I think we needed this direction in the other way because, like I said, I think people are confused that they really think they're conservative, but they're still getting Medicare. I think we have to have an awakening amongst ourselves on who we are, what the government should provide us, and then who should govern whom. But I think the real fear that we need to look at is it's not going to be the courts. It's not going to be us having another civil war, in my opinion. It's going to be 5 corporations. You talked about, we started a show about countries singing out individuals to colonize. Countries don't colonize anymore, whether it's politically correct or it's just outdated or whatever. Corporations do. Facebook does, Apple does, Google does. If the United States failed today, Google's surviving. Facebook is surviving. Meta, it's called now. They're all surviving. That's what I think we need to be aware of. And I think that's the real fear, not a civil war or not a splitting. It's truly going to be what happens when the corporations grow stronger than the countries.
Well, we'll get to that. But let's get back into these rights that people are afraid that they might lose.
Okay.
You mentioned a few of them. Gay rights, women's rights, African Americans, affirmative action, things of that nature. All of the great social milestones are threatened by the ruling and the rollback of this Roe versus Wade by this conservative court. And it scares a lot of people.
But I guess what I'm confused by is who didn't see this coming? And that's what I'm saying. This is what happens when you elect candidates like Trump. They vote for candidates like they did. I don't believe, at least Connell, the last woman on the Supreme Court, Amy Connell Barrett, excuse me, I think that's her name. I don't think she's qualified to be on the Supreme Court. I think what happens now from a legal point of view, we're so worried about getting younger judges up there. And we're so worried about getting our judge up there for the longest time. We probably need to, the best thing we could do is implement a statute that says you can't appoint a federal judge until they get to be 50, to give them some time. Because what's happening there is once we get some of this experience, I realize I haven't lived the lives you two have just from listening to y'all's stories. So there's value there. But if you put me on the Supreme Court at 35, I'm 49 now, I wouldn't have this conversation. So what I'm saying is, whatever that is, whether to me the fear is that insecurity where I'm better than you because of the color of my skin that once existed in this country, instead of actually looking for the commonalities or looking for our activities, is now going on with R's and D's. And it's the same sin, it's the same fear, it's the same insecurity that I have to say, I'm better than you. The reason I have to make you a villain is so I can be the hero. But people who are struggling, people who are trying to survive, you just want some help. And I think that gets back into right now we have too much time. We've got to remember, as y'all, I don't have to tell you two, back in the day before all this transportation and communications, just going across the state could take a whole day.
Yeah. Hold your thought. We run up on a station break, so we're going to take this time and view our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, keepers of the knowledge for people who speak the truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Do you have something to say? Do you want your voice heard? Join the We Believe Global lineup. Be the star of your own show. For more info, call 800-492-5186, option number 1, or visit online at webelieve.global.
We're back. We're broadcasting live from We Believe Digital Broadcast Studio. We're being seen on YouTube, on Facebook, on Roku TV, and our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. On Roku TV, our app sits there right next to Netflix and Showtime. So we are a newcomer to the marketplace, but we're growing fast every day, and we need your content, we need your involvement. So call us at 800-492-5186. Go to our website, hit our donate button, hit our share button on all of our content and our stories. We have some of the best content that's being produced anywhere in this country. We're a serious network. Yes, we do focus on sports and entertainment on some other shows that are on this platform, but we also bring you articulate, heart-wrenching, truthful conversation. People call it truth to power. And my guests are known for speaking truth to power. Dr. Henderson,
Yes, sir.
Brent said that the states still have the ability to do the right thing. But I don't believe African Americans would have made any gains without federal involvement. Or we threatened now because of the rollback of the Supreme Court's ruling for the federal government to give the states rights back?
Of course not. The states already had their rights. They know that the Supreme Court in America is not significant when it comes to the policymakers in the individual states. They care nothing about a Supreme Court decision if they don't like it, because they know two things. The Supreme Court does not have an army, nor does the court have any enforcement powers.
Hold your point right there. Let's take this call, Dr. Henderson.
I'm right, because
Thank you, sir.
Caller, you're on the air.
It's me, Malcolm.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Really great show. Thank you for the programming. And you know, I just had this thought when we're celebrating the Independence Day, and I hear what Mr. Garrett is. I hear what Mr. Garrett is saying about this is the greatest country in the world, but at the same token, it seems like there's some people out there that are almost taking advantage of the fact that we love the country so much. And it seems like there's a segment of society that kind of knows that, and they're taking advantage of that to scrap up power and control. And I don't think it helps our country. And I just wanted to ask for your comments on that. And thank you again for a wonderful show.
Thank you, caller. Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
We were talking about the lack of involvement from the federal government, and I was of the opinion that James Meredith would have not have been allowed in the University of Mississippi without the federal government, and that we wouldn't have voting rights acts. We wouldn't have any of the things that have empowered and tried to level the playing field for the minorities in this country without the strong arm of the federal government. But you're saying that states always had the rights to do what?
Anything they wanted to do. They made the laws on the local level, in education, in economic, and other areas. They cared nothing about what the federal government endorsed in any area of activity for the people. You're talking about voting rights. You're talking about James Meredith. The only reason James Meredith got into Ole Miss were several, of course. One, he was qualified academically. And since the government in Mississippi didn't want this country, this city, this state, where he was maneuvering up there in Ole Miss, to burn down, where thousands of people get killed, economically, they decided to back down and let James Meredith get into that school. They decided not to kill him because he was the only one. European Americans don't care if one or two black folks or one or two Native Americans or one or two Puerto Ricans or one or two Jews get into an institution, and they're going to do everything they can to keep a limited number. And then when they get to the point where it is opened by force, that's when they start cracking down, redlining, calling in their good buddies, the Ku Klux Klan, calling in the citizen councils, calling in the big money boys to take your territory or your community and rebuild it and sell it and rent it to their own kind. So those things that happened to black people to give them a little temporary gain was done on an economic basis to keep the power and the economic resources in the hands of the people that wrote the Constitution and their relatives. That is a historical fact, and that's what it is, because these things are temporary, all of them. And that's why after a law is passed, you always find that the federal government and the state governments tamper with that law and make sure there's no equality, no taxation with representation for the people that they have exercised out of any good policy. And that has been the history of America in every area of activity, where there's always been a discrimination aspect for the so-called minority, and specifically the black man, from the Revolutionary War to the last major war, which was called Vietnam.
It sounds, from listening to Dr. Henderson, that we have not made as much progress as we should have. And I agree that there have been some difficult times in America for all of its citizens. They're dealing with its minority populations and the immigrants and the rights of others, especially others than the European population that the Constitution protected with full first-class citizenship in the very beginning. But we have made tremendous gains. We have seen African Americans rise to positions of power and influence. You know, I was able to see the first African American president. We never thought we would have an African American president until Barack Obama broke that glass ceiling. African Americans hold positions of power and influence throughout this entire country. We lost a great general in Colin Powell that was Secretary of Defense. African Americans, Miss Rice was Secretary of State. We African Americans have pushed themselves up through all obstacles to achieve and to hold prominent positions where they can make a change in this country. And today, America has the first African American female vice president in Kamala Harris. And so we celebrate the fact that America has been the greatest experiment and the greatest country of all times, even with its hard history. It still provides more opportunity than any other country or any other nation that we've ever known. And so for that, we say, God bless America, keep her strong, and keep her safe. And then we say to America, you can do better. You know, Brent, we have to get beyond the indifferences in America. We have to become one country, one family, one nation where all people are treated equally and with the same regard. I mean, we have to get there. But I understand Dr. Henderson's point when the state of Mississippi sends $1 to Washington, D.C. and get $3 back, but yes, denies the acceptance of Medicaid into Mississippi because it was promoted and evolved under black leadership under Barack Obama. Obamacare we don't want. And I'm told by Chris Young, outstanding young man that's concerned about what's going on in this country and this world, that for every dollar that Mississippi would send to Washington for Medicaid, they would get $5.63 back in this state, and yet it denies it. What makes Mississippi deny the benefit to all of its citizens by denying Medicaid expansion?
Well, I mean, the theory behind it is that we cannot pay for every Medicaid, and just for the record, I'm for Medicaid expansion. I know I'm playing the role of the white devil this evening, but the theory is we have to live within our budget, and that the fear is, or the justification the current administration has used, is that one day the federal subsidies would stop and that our Medicaid component or our Medicaid bill would be 10 times what it is now, whatever the numbers are, and we couldn't afford it, so we couldn't expand the role. That's the theory behind it.
Do you think that's got anything to do with the population? Mississippi has a 40% African American population, and when you kick in the Hispanic population, we're right there at 50%, 51% population swing and shift in Mississippi. Do you think that has anything to do with the decision by the current leaders?
Well, see, I'll ask you two this. I see race in 2022 in Mississippi being a byproduct, but not the main fact. The main fact to me is still an agricultural, small community-based mentality of have versus have-nots. Of course, that's gone on through time. But I don't see them denying things because of a pure racial issue. It's just like the same reason the city of Jackson doesn't have clean drinking water. I don't think anybody's sitting there saying that African-American cities shouldn't have clean drinking water. I think they're sitting there saying, whether they're in Biloxi, South Haven, or Madison, that ain't our problem. And we lack in Mississippi the view that we're only as strong as the weakest link. Now, my question to you two gentlemen, I'll be interested from y'all's perspective and y'all's experience. Do y'all disagree with that? But I believe that everybody right now in the current administration, Tate Reeves, and we had this conversation before, and I was thinking about it today. Tate Reeves is from Vicksburg, but he technically lives in Rankin County before he was here. Philip Gunn, the Speaker of the House, is from Clinton. Delbert Hosemann is from Jackson. The Secretary of State, I'm not even sure who that is. Is that McRae? Is that the
Watson?
Watson, you're correct. Watson. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. Watson might be from the coast. I'm not sure on that. And then McRae is the treasurer. Now the auditor's from Jones County, but the treasurer, he's a McRae, so he's from Jackson. So the majority of your leadership is from Jackson. We don't even have a diverse group across the state from white people. To me, it's still that Jackson mentality that's running the state. And obviously those are going to be white males. Now, the AG's a white female Fitch who's lived in Jackson for a majority of years, but she claims up north. But to me, it's that small mentality. Like I said, we're going to take care of ours. We just lack the vision to say, we have to make sure everybody who's working here has a good education. We lack the vision to say it's better for us to have everybody healthy, to have great schools, to have great opportunities, because we'll all rise. We just don't have that mentality because of the agricultural community.
Wow. Dr. Henderson.
Well, now, I can't agree with our wonderful, outstanding guest. He is only about 35% correct. Now, he knows more about the law than I do. Since I'm just a little, non-significant American who lives in Hinds County, I know there are only 3 people in Mississippi that make all the laws through appointments and selections of who is going to be in the major political positions throughout the state. And that's the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the House Speaker. Whenever someone dies or retires, they appoint someone to take that office. They're going to call that person in. And suppose they call Brent in to be the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi. They're going to say, Brent, you're a great Republican. I'm just using him as an example. He'll probably declare that he's not a Republican. He has the right to do whatever he want to do and be a party official if he chooses to be so. But I'm going to use him as an example. I want you to be the Attorney General, Brent. Now, you are going to be an independent person. Can you read, Brent? Yes. These are the 3 things you can't do. Now, you can do anything else you want. And I'm not going to name those 3 things on this international channel. And Brent will look at these 3 things and say to himself, I can or I can't. And he will make a declaration at that point to the governor what he can do. And the governor always going to have 3 people that he's going to call in at least for the interview. And he's going to select the one that's going to promote the status quo in the state of Mississippi, in New York City, in Washington, D.C., anywhere. That's the way it's done. Then they're going to appoint people, and then they're going to decide when to go to Hinds County, Washington County, up on the coast, down on the coast, and see who we're going to let this time run for the House, who is going to be the sheriff, who is going to be the senator from this area. The governor, lieutenant governor, the speaker, and their good friend, who is ever the highest elected person in that area, going to make them a recommendation. And they're going to select the next senator, the next judge, the next member of the House. And they're going to follow in step with the Constitution of Mississippi, with the local mandates in the cities and the counties, and stay in the supermajority in all agencies, commissions, boards, and fact-finding entities in this state. Nothing going to change significantly.
Well, Brent, I mean, we cannot have a mentality and a philosophy that we have to hold a population down and keep ourselves down at the same time. I mean, that just flies in the face of sanity. Mississippi has been last so long until it ought to be apparent that we got to do things differently if we are going to be able to move this state where the people in Mississippi enjoy the American dream. We're celebrating the Independence Day of the greatest country in the world, but Mississippians, 50% of our population in the state lives below the poverty level. So, Brent, something's got to change for Mississippi. What do you think that something is going to be?
Well, when you say it has to, I would disagree with that. Why would it have to? We're so comfortable with being last, but more importantly, we don't have a Democratic Party. We just don't. And when we're talking about the capital city, 20% of the population voted last time for mayor. I mean, that's not a Republican thing. That's not a white oppression thing. And that's why I'm saying you could say generationally, but it's one of those things where we can't get a jury. We have difficulty sitting a jury to hear African Americans who've been murdered by African Americans, or African American cases who've been prosecuted by an African American district attorney, heard by an African American judge. And what I'm saying is, at some point, you have to ask the question: where is the rage? Why aren't more people angry? We're all drinking bottled water here because we can't go to your sink and drink water. Where is that rage? Where is that anger? But no one from Michigan, no one from California, no one from Mexico, no one from Spain is coming to fix our pipes. And should they?
No, they shouldn't. We're running out of time. It's been a great discussion, and a discussion that needs to continue. Now, Dr. Henderson, I want to give you the opportunity to say the last words here before we say good night to our viewers all across this country. I want us to remember that we are celebrating the Independence Day, the 4th of July, celebration of the greatest country that we've ever known. And yet we have shortcomings. What would be your final words?
My final words would be very brief, that I don't know of any black person in America that has a legitimate reason to celebrate the Declaration of Independence or the 4th of July. That's a lie in America today. That is, those that know the history of America. Those that attended the public schools are going to celebrate it because they don't know any better. And those that have not done the research to find out that American blacks have always been considered an outcast, a non-citizen in America, and they have no rights in the Constitution from the local to the national level, and you could include international if you want. And that's why they need to stand down.
You've heard it from Dr. Henderson and my guest, Brent Hazard. Until next time, have a great evening and stay safe. Good night.
Advertise on WeBelieve.Global, a brand new digital media platform. Share your brand with our audience on our many global live stream TV broadcasts and over the radio. For more info, visit WeBelieve.Global or call 800-492-5186, option 1.